In January 2013, then Prime Minister David Cameron gave in to nationalist populists inside and outside his parties and held out the prospects of a referendum on British EU membership. And the tight result in June 2016 was 52 to 48%. At that time, those who lived in the neglected regions of the island felt that they were the winners. In the eastern English county of Lincolnshire, for example, more than 70% of eligible voters voted for Brexit. At 75.6%, the residents of the small market town of Boston, who gave their name to the much more famous metropolis on the other side of the planet, were at the forefront nationwide. I talked about Boston in a longer video recently. While the approximately 35,000 Bostonians belong to the majority of the population, albeit a small one, these days, well, they are all alone. According to a survey by the market researcher Focal Data, with the exception of Boston, those who consider the exit from the EU to be a mistake are in the majority everywhere on the island. And these include neighbouring constituencies in Lincolnshire, traditionally conservative strongholds, as well as poor, always Labour-loyal districts in the metropolises of London and Birmingham, where at least 60% wanted Brexit in 2016. But that's bad news for the Tory government of Brexiteer Rishi Sunak, the fifth Conservative Prime Minister since that June day that radically changed Britain's domestic and foreign policies. The Tories are regularly 20 points behind Keir Starmer's Labour opposition party in the polls, and all of the claims by the head of government and his divided party that Brexit will bring glorious progress to neglected regions seems increasingly implausible in the face of reality. On the contrary, the disadvantages of the isolation step are becoming increasingly clear. This year, the university authority HESA shocked the billionaire university sector with new bad news. Since the final exit from the internal market and the customs union at the end of 2020, the number of students from the EU has fallen by more than half. While young Austrians or Germans were previously able to study on the island for the equivalent of 10,515 euros per year, they now have to shell out up to 43,000 euros in Bristol, Nottingham or Cambridge. And that's too much, as most people think. The universities can't be okay with that, as it makes them all the more dependent on students from Asia. At the same time, not least under pressure from the government, the high proportion of students from China should be noticeably reduced. But elsewhere too, Brexit is having a painful financial impact. The Independent Budget Authority OBR speaks of a loss of growth of 4%, not least due to the significant damper on British foreign trade. Exports to the EU alone have recently fallen by 15%. The continuing dispute over Northern Ireland's special status is adding to the uncertainty of industry and trade. Some signals from the Brexit government speak for a cautious rapprochement with the largest single market in the world, though. Opposition leader Starmer also proposes a more pragmatic approach to Brussels, which the majority of the electorate seems to want now. The conditions in the NHS healthcare system are of an emergency nature, and that's the information from the emergency call centres in the UK reads almost like the blackest British humour. The ambulances should only be called if you have the feeling that you are dying. In a country that sees itself as one of the world's largest economies and longs for old imperialist times. Or is it just a noisy minority giving that impression now? After all, almost half of Britons now consider Brexit to be a mistake, compared to just under 40% who still think it is the right thing to do. But despite everything, the camps are divided. Brexit is a crucial test for the British, but also the cohesion of the country is at stake. And in addition, a series of strikes in the public sector in response to the catastrophic conditions in the healthcare system makes it clear once again that the British anti-European course is increasingly proving to be a disservice to its own population. Do the Johnson is a phrase used behind closed doors, which roughly means to shirk responsibility after the UK has fallen into the nationalist well and especially Brexiteers like Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage, at the time the face of the right-wing populist UKIP, to be responsible for the misery. The British government now reportedly wants to boost the NHS England Health Service with more than 300,000 additional doctors, nurses and other staff over the next 15 years, they say at least. For this purpose, the number of training places is to be increased significantly. That is what the government in London announced on Friday. And in addition, the study time for prospective doctors could be shortened. As the newspaper Mirror reported, the number of NHS employees in England is expected to increase from the current 1.4 million to 2.2 million. There are currently 112,000 job vacancies in Britain's largest part of the country. The NHS has been chronically underfunded and understaffed for years. Many employees leave because of poor pay, and millions of people are waiting for routine procedures, and the waiting times for ambulances and in emergency rooms are enormous. Over the next few years, we will train twice as many doctors and train an additional 24,000 nurses per year to reduce waiting times and improve patient care. That was said by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. The government would be making available a further £2.4 billion for this over the next 5 years. Health Secretary Steve Barclay wrote in an op-ed for the Telegraph newspaper that it was the most radical reform since the NHS was founded 75 years ago. The opposition criticized that the measures should have been taken years ago. This plan comes too late for millions of people who have been in pain or have died in hospital corridors while awaiting treatment because the Conservative government has refused to act. That was said by the Liberal Democrat health spokeswoman Daisy Cooper. But the assessment of the UK government's understanding of the consequence of Brexit varies depending on different perspectives, even the staff shortages. While some argue that the UK government did not fully grasp the extent of the consequences, others believe that the challenges were anticipated at least to some degree. Critics argue that the UK government underestimated the potential economic impact of Brexit. Prior to the referendum, several economic forecasts, including those from government bodies like the Treasury, they did predict negative consequences such as reduced economic growth, increased inflation, and potential job losses. However, some Brexit proponents dismissed these warnings and suggested that leaving the EU would bring economic benefits. They still can't show me those. The complexity of trade arrangements and the intricacies of global supply chains were not fully appreciated by some proponents of Brexit. Critics argue that the UK government did not adequately consider the intricacies of trade negotiations, the challenges of establishing new trade deals, and the potential disruptions to existing trade relationships, at least when 700 trade deals are gone overnight. Another area of concern was the understanding of the extent of regulatory alignment required for trade with the EU. The intricacies of aligning regulation across various sectors, including manufacturing, agriculture, and services, were not fully anticipated. This lack of alignment has implications for market access and trade barriers. The challenges surrounding the Northern Ireland border were also not fully comprehended during the Brexit campaign. The complexities of maintaining a frictionless border on the island of Ireland while leaving the EU's customs union and single market became a significant point of contention during the negotiations. The legal and constitutional implications of Brexit were complex and multifaceted as well. Critics argue that the UK government did not fully grasp the potential impact on devolved administrations as well, or on the unity of the UK, or the potential legal challenges that might arise during the process. But instead of really thinking about the consequences, they made tons of empty promises, and none of them became true. And that's why I had to add the NHS here today, because over and over we are talking about the red bus and the infamous 350 million a week. None of that money went to the NHS after Brexit. And now they are promising a little bit of money, but one of the big points was that people left the NHS because of the poor wages. And if there is not a major development there, which the government refused just recently during the strikes, who will want to work there? That's something this government will have to answer as well. But if you want to know some more about Brexit or other UK politics, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.